Welcome to Perspective Shift. I am Frank.
I am Mike.
How are we doing today?
Awesome, Frank. How are you?
Doing really well. Today we're going to, we actually had a viewer email us a while back. I think it was back in October. Her name is Susan Francis, and she sent us the likes of Eric Butterworth.
Very excited.
And ever since she sent the email, I've been listening to him, so really good stuff. So
I say we dive right into Eric today.
Yeah, let's see.
New thought leader.
Let's give a little information about him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so Eric Butterworth, I believe, was it Emmett Fox was the first person we kind of covered?
Oh, yeah.
Who had kind of a relationship, or was Emmett Fox part of the Unity Church as well?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So Butterworth, part of the Unity Church. He was ordained a pastor in 1948, born in Canada.
Well, I think he might have been. Oh yeah, he was. Yes, correct.
Yeah. And then born in Canada.
Yep.
I knew that. What else about him? New Thought, spiritual teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Talks about a lot of the different concepts, that Frank and I go over, on this podcast each week. Where do you think we should kind of start?
Well, we'll hit the video. So I just want to, so obviously we mentioned other people here that were in Unity, but we didn't put a lot of emphasis on it. But Unity Church was founded by Charles Fillmore and his wife, Myrtle. I think her real name was Mary, but I think she went by Myrtle. Mm-hmm. And I think it was like in the late 1800s into like 1900s.
So a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time since it's been around. Yeah, so and then the 5 principles within Unity Church which they stand by, and it's different ways of putting them. But I heard this one. It's like God is love, I am love. Then it's thought, prayer, and action. So thought, obviously, the thought. What direction we want to go into. Prayer will then be the next thing for the what we call imagination. Yeah. And then obviously when you believe it, you will enact it, and it comes true. So these principles that Unity Church and New Age, or I should say New Thought community come up with, spans across the line of all these other things we covered that talk about the basic principles, the fundamental truths of our physical world we live in.
Exactly.
And they cover it well. And actually, Eric Butterworth covers it really well. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into a video.
Let's do it.
And listen to it and then take it from there.
Never reach any goal. Never achieve anything that cannot possibly be surpassed by you or someone. But keep reaching. And the reaching is what I call youthing. Keeps you alive. The great preacher Phillips Brooks said, "Sad will be the day for every person when he becomes absolutely content with the life he's leading, with the thoughts he's thinking, with the deeds he's doing. And there's not beating at the doors of his soul some great desire to do something larger, which he was meant and made to do because he is, in spite of all, a child of God." You cannot actually accept the term, "I'm a child of God," unless you're willing to accept the fact that you're a growing creature, and the end of your growth is far beyond anything that you can foresee. Keep on and keep on and keep on keeping on. It is out of the life of what Thoreau calls quiet desperation we have come up with the term middle age. It's an unfortunate term because there's the implication that life is half over. The rest is all downhill. Contrary to common belief, we do not slow down because we're getting old. We get old because we're slowing down. There are thousands of moping people who could renew their strength and youthfulness, say nothing of becoming free from aches and pains. They would just bestir themselves in mind and body and keep open in mind and spirit to the upward progressive sweep of life. The voice of Prometheus is always present. We will simply listen and give way to the pull of what we're calling divine discontent. There's absolutely no reason why the Promethean voice should progressively fade as we accumulate years. When Browning sings, "Grow old along with me," he's not acquiescing in the inevitability of deterioration. He's saying, grow onward. Don't just settle into the rut of old age. The full context of his thoughts, grow old along with me, the best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made. The best is yet to be. Grow on, grow onward, to achieve more and more. Whatever the age, we're in the continuing process of life. And growth is what it's all about. Life is for growing. Life is for growing. I have a book in me that has that title. It's going to come out of me one of these days. Life is for growing, not for getting there, not for achieving something, not for being rich, not even for being healthy, getting all the things that you desire in life, being content. Life is for growing. That's the purpose of it all.
I like that. That speaks to me because I'm a little above middle age.
I think that was a great first start.
Mike's on the other side of middle age, and I'm above it. So,
but this is why our perspective is cool, though.
Yeah,
it's a well-rounded perspective.
Yeah.
But I like that we started with that video. He sounds like a preacher. He sounds like a pastor or whatever in that, or a minister, whatever he calls him.
Yeah.
He sounds like it, in these different videos. He's got this certain like speech and way about him. You can tell he's older in age in this video.
Yeah.
Some of the ones I have, he sounds younger.
Yeah, and obviously into the Unity, speaking about Unity Church, it is a Bible-based study, but what I like what he does too is, I don't know if we'll have a video of it, but he'll take, I think in one of the videos I have, he'll take the understanding of like the prodigal son, and he'll break it down. So you got the father, the older son, and the prodigal son who leaves and comes back after wasting all his money and what's considered to be. But the father, the older son, and the prodigal son are all concepts within us. They're not separate people. We should never look at anything that as separate, but entities within us, not outside of us. So people be like, oh yeah, if they'll look at the prodigal son, they're like, well, I'm the older son. I was more responsible. And I'm like, yeah, but you had to be the father, and you had to be the prodigal son to even recognize the understanding. So this whole collectiveness, that's what they talk about. So when he talks about the Bible, he breaks it down into all these parts in it, but they're really one. They're coming from the one mind that we're in, but different. We play it out from different psychological pathways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I although he discusses the Bible, it's very similar to like that of like a Neville Goddard or something that we've discussed in the past, because a lot of the videos I was listening to, and as I was researching Butterworth these last 2 weeks, I realized these concepts from the Bible, etc., although they were twisted throughout time and in religion, etc., to for people, or a different perspective was given on them. There is so much truth that comes out of the Bible. So if you're sitting at home and you're like, I'm not a religious person, etc., I wouldn't consider myself a religious person either. I'm a spiritual person, but these tools, there is such as the Bible, this allows us to go within. This gives us a different framework, and it's been around for thousands of years. So don't let the Bible, or the fact that he was an ordained minister cloud your view. Because I used to do that. I used to this must not be what I was looking for because it's coming from this direction. There's so much truth and so much oneness, wholeness, consciousness, that you can find within the Bible and through these concepts. Because I once heard this saying, and it's like, what was it? Jesus wasn't teaching love. Jesus wasn't teaching Christianity. Muhammad wasn't teaching Islam. There was another one too.
Buddha probably wasn't teaching.
Buddha wasn't teaching Buddhism. What they were all teaching was love, and that's the truth. What's coming from the Bible is a way for you to learn more about yourself and your inner working, and how you can, work within yourself to see the reflection of the outside world you're looking for. It's not the Bible we were taught growing up, at least in the last 100 years, which is a different perspective of you came here, you need to suffer in order to find the afterlife. That's something that was skewed a certain way and done, with the intention of control. So something like this, it opens your eyes to the true love and the true meaning behind these different words that we find in the Bible.
Yeah, and kind of like what he talked about in this clip we just watched about the middle age. The idea, it's not that age makes us older. It's stopping the expansion of what we want to do. And Christ talked about that. He's like, become childlike. So when we become childlike, and so we actually start to expand, get ideas, and There is like, there was a point in my life when I was like in my 40s and like, okay, I have to hurry up. I got to do something,
Do what?
Exactly. So when I started to open my eyes to these concepts, which I was very well aware of intellectually, but not really practicing them in enacting them. But once I started practicing and enacting them, I started understanding that. So I don't know the difference between feeling like I'm 13 than I am now. It's a feeling. Like feeling hungry, whether it was 20 years ago or now, is the same. But I'm able to jump into that feeling of excitement because it's something new to learn and new to understand and keep expanding. So it's all about the expansion and growth, like he said, but not getting to the place. Because when I was younger, I was trying to get somewhere, and there was always a slight anxiety, and if I didn't reach it, fell into depression, and then momentarily I get distracted by something else, and I wasn't depressed, I was in anxiety. So I played this very fluctuating emotional game, and then I'm like, okay, then I'm thinking, okay, it was something outside that was making me happy and something outside of me that was making depressed. And the truth, it wasn't. It was all contained within me.
Well, and that's where I believe personally that like 98, 99% of the world lives is exactly the state you just described, which is I'm reacting to, whatever that day might bring, rather than looking at it and accepting it, allowing it, and saying, okay, this must be part of whatever I'm, trying to create, whatever I'm willing into existence.
Yeah, because I've come to understand that, like, if something does happen that you seem to be not preferential, it's entangled with your belief that you may and may not be aware of, and that's why you're going through that. So someone would say, well, there's a lesson to be learned there. It's not a punishment, but there's a lot of our subconscious that we're not fully aware of, so we end up going through these experiences. When you let go, I'm like, okay, this is happening, so what? All of a sudden you learn something about yourself, and that's part of the expansion. People think expansion is like just making more money, feeling good, getting great night's sleep every night after night, getting healthier and healthier. I'm like, no. A lot of expansion in the physical world has to do with going down in order to go up, kind of like the trajectory, like a skateboarder on a ramp. In order to get higher above the platform in which they start, they must excel down to get higher to this point. And that's kind of, we use the physics of it. So again, when something's happening, like the winter of your life is coming, embrace it, fully embrace it, know something will come great out of it. And that's when the spring and everything pops out of the ground, and it's flourished by summer, and then it starts all over again. But you're right, when it starts all over again, it's a new harvest, it's a new winter, it's a new spring. It's not the same. People can look at it like, this is boring. Every year it's winter, spring, summer, fall. I'm like, yeah, but it's a different winter, it's a different spring, it's a different. And as you get older, you actually embrace the winter, and it's no longer the opposite of summer, it's just different. And when you'll actually investigate it, I'm like, well, what would summer be without winter? Oh, all right. So now it's no longer, I'm allowing to separate myself from it, so I'm not getting, creating anxiety or some psychosis from it. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I'm going to learn something now. And then now I'm going to enjoy. And that's how it happens. And that's what he states very well in that.
He does a good job of that. Let's jump into the next video.
All right.
The study of metaphysics gives us a new sense of perspective by which to deal with the world. In a very real sense, it introduces us to a new dimension of reality. Fact is that when we get into the study of metaphysics, humanly there's a tendency to get on our charger like Don Quixote and go out and try to change the world. But one of the fundamentals that so often is overlooked is that metaphysics does not deal with changing the world. The whole principle is based upon ourselves. It is not the world that we're concerned about, but our thought about the world. The important key to effective living, then, is not trying to find the way to set things right and to straighten people out and to get the world to stop acting like it does. Not to set things right, but to see them rightly. Right seeing is the fundamental essence of truth. Metaphysics is a technique in right seeing, helping you to see things from a particular perspective, as Emerson would say, from the highest possible point of view. And all this is wrapped up in what we're calling today the art of thinking. It seems to me that the greatest neglect in education today, and it's not my intent to nitpick about the educators, because certainly people here in this profession are doing a tremendous work, helping people in a tremendous way. But I think there has been a neglect that has set into modern education. It's very subtle. Unless we think we're pointing at one particular movement, we'll say that the same problem is found in the study of metaphysics, another kind of education. It's a failure in the instruction in the art of thinking. In other words, the whole thought process is so often simply taken for granted. We're thinking creatures, and so we think. And we're told what to think. And we're exposed to all sorts of levels of learning, and we're supposed to think about them and to memorize them and to report them back much as we've heard them. It is rare in education that we're introduced to the process of how to think. The mind is dealt with for the most part as a fact collector and a word dispenser.
I like that.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think this, the reason I selected this video was it's really powerful how he, number one, describes and labels metaphysics. So I kind of wrote down a quote. So he says about metaphysics, it's not about changing the world, but changing our thoughts about the world. And that's what Frank and I are getting at when we're talking about acceptance. Too often we're all running around saying, this would be better, or this would be okay if this would have happened. This ought to happen. This is where we get upset. This is where we kind of toil with ourselves, is we keep thinking things are not happening as they were supposed to. But that's not the key to life. The key to life is not everything outside of you needs to happen as you picture it. It's understanding that, you don't need to change the outside world in order to experience what you're looking to experience. It's changing the thoughts about the outside world, how we perceive, that allows us to change, the narrative or the perception, the story, etc. Then he goes on to say, what's going on in, classrooms today and education today, which, by the way, this was, probably 30 years ago. You can tell he's, sounds much younger. So this has been a constant type of thing. But he explains that our education system is not teaching us how to think, but it's telling us how to think. And that is a big thing. So he says we are told what to think, not how to think. And so we go to a classroom. We've got an authoritative person, in the front of the classroom. And they tell us, what is right and what's wrong. And there's only one right answer. And we all have to find that answer, and we all have to find that answer on our own. We can't work with each other, because then we're cheating. So we have to find it by ourselves. And this couldn't be more opposite of the world we actually live in. I can't think of any project I've done in my working career life or, after school that did not involve working with others. In fact, everything in this world is accomplished by others coming together, many coming together to create. Something gets accomplished, okay, then it's got to go to a company. That company takes it. Then an advertisement group comes in, etc. These are how things grow. And so it's very funny that we're taught in school, to find the answer by yourself, because this does not exist, in the real world. This is why we all go out and we're afraid to start businesses. We're afraid to do our own things because we can't figure out how everything needs to happen. We don't need to. We just need to have the idea, and then we begin to move forward, and the right people and scenarios and situations will come into play. But we tie ourselves to this idea that we have to know what we're doing. And this goes back to our education, where we're told how to think. And so what we're doing on this show, in my opinion, and what we're trying to do is help us to unlearn a lot of this conditioning that we grew up with, being told, what the story is, what the narrative is, what's going on. You flip on the news today, and we are told what to think. Depending on what news channel you're watching, you're told a different opinion and a different way to think about what's going on in the world. But we are living our lives based on a story that's been told to us through media, through movies, through school, etc. This is how the world works. Right now, there's this narrative coming around that we're going to have a recession. This will be a year that there is a recession. And this narrative is being fed and being pushed. And if enough people adopt this narrative, those people will experience it. I think I brought this up on the show in the past, but, Walt Disney, one of his famous quotes was, I heard there's going to be a recession. I've decided not to participate. Walt Disney is not saying this to be cute and because he's a billionaire. It's because we participate in a reality. We don't have to take somebody's narrative and go, that's the only narrative. But that's not what we were taught. We were taught that, there only is one narrative. What an authority tells us, what a government tells us, what a news station tells us. Then we have no other choice to believe anything else. Why? Because the majority of people all believe this narrative. And since the majority of people believe this narrative, it has to be true. And this is where the unlearning comes into play, that is totally false.
Well, yeah, but let's back up, because even what we taught in school, there is truth to it.
Of course.
But when we limit the understanding, so what he's talking about is it's not about listening to the outside world, it's to find your own truth, and all truths are true. So what it is it's not that the narratives were wrong, they were limited or limiting. There was no expansion. So somewhere along the line, what we learned in school when I was a kid, people came in. So right now, we have to be careful that we're not saying this is the way to think either, because then all we do is get on the other side of the net.
Fall into the same trap.
Yeah, we fall into the same trap. So the information that we grew up with wasn't necessarily wrong. It wasn't complete. And we were taught that it is complete and this is the answer. I'm like, well, this is what we had the little issue with. But everything that came about from some insight that somebody came through the natural process of imagination and thought. And then someone was like, okay, they were happy, they were successful, this is how they did it. I'm like, whoa, that's not really how they did it. How they were feeling. Well, they may have done it that way, so they start teaching and replicating. But, we know you take a copy of something, and by the fifth or sixth carbon of it, it starts to fade. It no longer works. And why? It's like because you have to renew it. You can't. You want a copy from the master, not from the carbon. And so, but it wasn't that it was wrong. It's just that we haven't added anything new into it. So even these ideas, these are just principles we're teaching, not how to think. So we have to be careful that we don't okay, they're thinking wrong. I'm like, no. But if you think this is the only way to think, it's short-sighted. Not necessarily wrong, it's short-sighted because it may work for them. But hey, over time, I had beliefs and thoughts too. And and I got a little bit older, I had to change those beliefs and thoughts. Not because I had to, because they started becoming carbon. And I started copying. I'm like, okay, I have to renew something. And when I renew it, come into it, that's the childlike state. The childlike state is every day something's brand new. But once I think I'm happy because of this, I'm happy because I climbed the tree. No. You climbed the tree because you were happy, not the other way around. So that's the principle, the fundamental understanding is go within and then see what comes out of you. And that's the structure of the world. And then write about it. Write a book about it. Write the 7 laws or whatever it is. But that's one viewpoint of infinite viewpoints. And that's why I tell people not, and I do it to myself, don't get hooked up on necessarily the steps. Do it. What we call the doctrines of religion. There's nothing wrong with that. But the reason doctrines started is because someday someone did something and they found this immense peace. And when they found immense peace, they're like, okay, let me reverse engineer this. What happened? Okay, first I closed my eyes. Then I prayed to God. I got on my knees and I gave myself the sign of the cross. And so let's start with that. And then let's add this in, add that in. All of a sudden, if you follow this, you'll find it. But everyone's like, well, now I'm being told to do that. And I do everything. And I'm like, yeah, my knees are hurting and I feel annoyed right now. But you can lose yourself in that. There's nothing wrong with that. But realize we are the narrator of the outside world and how we view it. And yeah, there are other people implementing or imprinting onto it, but the complete structure of the universe is kind of like the screen to a movie. The screen has nothing to do with the movie. And what I mean is, the same screen in the movie theater or the TV at home can put a comedy on and could put a horror movie on. But the TV doesn't really care. So what picture do you want to do? Stop worrying about what somebody else is watching. Who cares what this story is? Right?
We're like fighting to all have the same horror story or all have the same comedy playing. Yeah, and we're saying, you're not right because this is funny or because this is hard or because this is sad.
Yeah, everyone has to agree with me in order for me. Now, if I need
for me
more,
to feel
if I need a lot of if I need a lot of people to agree with me for my understanding or my beliefs to become true, it means I don't really believe them.
Correct.
I don't. I have no faith in them. So and that's why a lot of times too, when someone comes with a new idea or something like that, the understanding of go forth and tell no one, because it's not for anybody else. You might annoy the hell out of people by telling them stuff. So when me and Mike do the show, we're talking about concepts, and people are choosing to come on and choosing to leave as well. I would never force this into anybody. I wouldn't want to force onto me. But the fundamental understanding of all this at the base never changes. And it's who we are. We are the filmmaker. We are the projector. The outside physical world is the structure. It is the screen. But with nothing on it, it's just a white piece of material. But once I place my image onto it, reflect the thoughts from inside, all of a sudden I forgot I'm looking at the screen and I'm actually in the movie. I'm in the play. I'm actually acting it out. But then what enlightenment is understanding that's what you're doing. Okay, if I understand that, then I could change the narrative and the character that to make it anew. Not better. I'm not trying to be better than anyone. That's just the most ridiculous thing in the world. I'm just trying to expand and grow. And I know in my life what doesn't work to expand. I know what works when I allow stuff. But I don't know exactly what it is in the moment until I enact it. And that's kind of the message that Eric Butterworth is talking about.
Yeah.
It's a personal journey. Leave other people alone. And guess what? The paradox is when you leave other people alone, all of a sudden you look to your right, you look to your left, and it's like, wow, we have a conversation. This is how perspective shift started, But even Mike's perspective is different than mine, but no one on the show is better or greater than the other one. It's just different.
And that's exactly what you're saying. My perspective is different from every person on the other end of this, podcast listening right now. We all occupy this one Earth, but we've got 7-8 billion people on this planet. That means we have 7 or 8 billion different worlds.
Yeah, there's
not one specific world that we all occupy. Think about this. You have we just had the holidays pass by. Think about your family and friends when you got together and you saw them. Depending on what they were going through at that time, what their work-life balance was, what the romantic life balance was, a lot of that played a role in whether or not they had a good holiday. And it's because the reason you have or allow yourself to have a good holiday is the narrative you're running in your head. So if this year was a mess and it was horrible, etc., you're not going to experience that holiday as the same somebody who had the best year of their life. You're going to be looking at it with this tinged, through a dirty window, if you will, of previous thoughts and, some, pain, suffering, whatever. And so this is why you can have, siblings. They both grew up in the same household, but one perceives it as this horrible experience and the other is like, what are you talking about? We had a pretty normal childhood growing up. It's all dependent about who the observer is and how they're observing. What mental narrative have they associated with growing up or with that scenario or with that holiday? So yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and part of that narrative is a lot of people do not like to be in the minority of thought. So
no, because then they doubt themselves.
Well, if they hear people complaining, they start complaining. Mm-hmm. So being awake, or I shouldn't say awake, everyone's awake because you're aware of your situation, but when you become enlightened, so like what Mike was talking about, like the holidays. So somebody came in, I'm like, how were your holidays? Like, oh, don't ask. All of a sudden,
had nothing to do with the holidays.
Yeah, no, it's just it was their
perception to it.
Yeah, but I think it was their baseline understanding, or what I should say, default mechanism to actually complain. But then in that instant, being aware of this, I could inject stuff into the conversation, not to be obnoxious. And then by the end of the conversation, they actually had a good holiday. Because you can take your past and look at it and rewrite it. You know, I remember like, what was it? There was a movie, what the hell was it? Richard Gere and
oh shit, I don't know.
And Julia Roberts.
Pretty Woman?
Pretty Woman, yes.
Yep.
Now, I read about this, that when it first came out and they put it into the theater to see how people respond to it, it was horrible.
Really?
Bad response. But what they did is the editor went back, re-edited, took this out, added this in, whatever, and then it became a brilliant movie.
I was going to say that's everybody.
So it was something that was already made, and then they went back and edited it, and it forever changed. So I could tell a story of my childhood and like, oh my God, but then I could tell the same story of my childhood and I could have people laugh. Mm-hmm. So I'm creating a narrative, and I like the narrative of feeling good, expanding. But people, like, they tell it how it is. I'm like, but who told you it had to be sad or had to be bad? Well, this is how it is. I'm like, why is that bad? I'm like, well, when you stand above it, the structure of it, everything just is. We were told that if that happens, that should be sad.
So whenever something like that, like that example you just gave comes up, I think of a woman named Oprah Winfrey. And I'm going to bring her up for
a woman named Oprah.
I know, right?
For all who don't know who Oprah
Anybody
is.
who's never heard of it. But I need to bring her up specifically for two reasons. So one, Oprah Winfrey was a fan of Mr. Eric Butterworth, the gentleman we're covering today. She has spoken highly of his work, highlighted his work. So that's, a cool little backstory on that. But Oprah, and I didn't know this until, much later on in life, but she was, raped by her, I believe it was her cousin. She had a really bad home life growing up, and it was very tough, and she was actually physically raped, very traumatic type of stuff going on.
Yeah,
and society would tell us that, like, that's absolutely horrendous, and that's horrible, and that she has every reason in the world, to be upset and be angry, and but she took that, and rather than allowing it, that situation or those a series of events to take her life from her and take her peace from her and say, hey, I am now broken because when I was a child, I was raped repeatedly by a family member, somebody I should have been able to trust. Society would tell her, you're right. You don't need to. You shouldn't have to trust anybody. How could you trust anybody after going through something like that? But yet she takes that and says, no. And she turns this into, the brand and the person that she became. And look at how she can take something so dark, something so horrible, that the world would say, you're right. Stay in pain, stay broken, that should have never happened to anybody. And she says, what are you talking about? And puts together the pieces and becomes this, huge influencer that she is today, where I can't even mention her name without everybody in the room knowing who we're talking about. That's true power. That's what we're talking about here. Society tells us that there's like these things that happen to us, like a parent passing, a family member passing, all these, growing up abused, that these are like justified grievances, literally things that we deserve to be broken about. And you're right, you should feel that way. That's what society tells us, but it's not true.
Yeah, when you experience that, whether society told you or not, you're going to feel the pain.
Of course, 100%. But how do you deal with that pain?
Yeah, and that's where and every human being has the alchemist within them. That's what she did is she transmuted the energy. She took that energy. So that's why everything is good. We're not here saying that if someone dies, like, oh, so let's go to the movies today.
No, not at all.
It's about taking that would be the winter month, if you will, or the winter season, I should say, of your life. And then you want to take that, transmute it, make it into a seed, and watch it germinate in the spring and the summer. It's just how life is. It's nothing we asked for. But she was able to get through the winter, and look what she did. She created a forest out of that seed.
Exactly.
But every human being has a capacity. So when you look at someone like an Oprah Winfrey or an Eric Butterworth, they're teaching you in different methods that you have it within me. It's like, okay, Oprah's like, look what happened to me, and I was able to turn around. It didn't happen overnight. You know, I'm sure she still ponders it, looks at it. You know, I'm not in Oprah's head at all, but that's what gives us strength to get. I got through that. What next? Can I could take this little seed, this little acorn can make a forest of oak trees.
But there's a reason that Oprah features, people like Eric Butterworth, Michael Singer, Eric Eckhart Tolle, all these people that we're featuring. It's because what she went through, and this is what's helped her. And so we look at somebody that's successful and who they're featuring, and she's creating best-selling authors by featuring them and having them on her show.
Yeah, making them wide.
But raising this conversation that Frank and I are having to a mass media level, this information everybody deserves to hear, because this is the foundation of how our universe works. And for some reason, we don't talk about this in Western school. We're not taught, hey, look, what you believe, what you search for is what you're going to experience. We're not taught. We're taught there's a physical world outside of us, and we just happen to be here, and everything's just happening around us randomly.
We do talk about it, but it's not in full length. Weston created Santa Claus, right?
Yeah.
What's Santa Claus?
Well, are you talking about like the history of Santa Claus, the sacrum, and like coming down the chimney, or the spinal fluid coming?
The story you tell your child is you write on a piece of paper what you want. And if you act good, high vibration, it will come on this day called the 25th of December. That's the law of attraction. But we don't apply it to everything. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden the kid's like miserable for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it is. Santa Claus, if you will, is the universal force in which it is. So again, if you act bad, what do you get? You get coal, a very undesirable. Actually, today it's probably desirable because it's a lot of money.
A little too expensive.
Yeah, it's probably cheaper to get an iPhone than it is a bag of coal these days.
That's funny.
Yeah. But so we were taught this, but we didn't. But then we were taught the opposite. Like we have such mixed messages in the West, rather than just a forward way of thinking. But and I don't know, I know about Eastern stuff, but a lot of times too in the Eastern you gotta be careful because it was against material, and well, we have to marry the two. I know the Native Americans were equal within the spirit and the physical world, and that's kind of like, okay, that seems to be the balancing point. Hey, that's what Buddha found out, right? He had everything in the palace and left, and it's like, I'm out of here. Gave everything up and live like a bum for a while. And it's like, okay, this isn't working. So he found this happy medium, and everyone's happy medium is different. So when we go within, you will find your happy medium. Stop trying to, like when we listen to an Eric Butterworth or Oprah Winfrey or something like that, we want to see that, okay, they had the capacity to do it this way, but I am not going to do it that way. We look at people to see what they went through to how they got here, but don't follow that path because that path is theirs. You have to have your own path. You're just looking at it to tell you that it's possible. That's all I need to know. It's possible. And when you actually understand the principles, how they're laid out from the universe, everything is possible. Why? Because you're not doing it. God's doing it. You're just following along. Just like when I'm driving the car is the one moving it. The GPS is telling me where to go, but I have to enact it. If I don't, I'm sitting in my driveway in a car that's not started. I still have the car, I still have the GPS. But unless I drive the car, enact it, put action to what it is I want to do, and then the GPS will say, make a right-hand turn. Well, I have to make the right-hand turn. So we're involved in the action-oriented, but it's done for us.
Well, and give people at home an analogy. We have a GPS, an internal GPS. That's our intuition.
Internal guidance system, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you get in this state of, happiness, bliss, what you want to experience and feel. And then it's not, okay, now I need my thinking mind to tell me what to do. It's not so much that. It's what naturally comes next. What I guess feeling do I have to do next? You start to move in the direction. So if you get like Frank uses this example a lot, if you get the message, oh, I should go grab a cup of coffee. Don't say, hey, how is a cup of coffee going to help me achieve this business? then you don't get the cup of coffee. And it's when you're standing in line at the cup of coffee place or at the coffee shop, you bump into somebody who, overhears you talking on your phone about your story, and they say, hey, I work in this field. I'd love to give you some more information about it. That's the universe at work. That's God at work, if you will. And so don't discount when you've got an internal guidance to do something. If you're feeling this pull to do something, there's a reason.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the system. So let's break it down to the Unity Church and how they break it down. I mentioned they have the 5 principles, and one is God is love.
Yep.
I am love. So think about that. What does that mean?
I am God.
Yeah. So if God is love, I am love, we are God. So then we go into the thinking, right? Okay, what do I want to? You ask yourself, what do I want out of my life? Where do I want to go? Okay, this is what I want. Well, now go into your imagination and pray over it. It will generate a feeling. All right. So
and talk about what prayer is. What's prayer?
It's your imagination.
Picturing yourself in that feeling.
Already having it.
Correct.
So let's take it down to GPS. Okay, the GPS, I know it works. It loves God, and I am that. And then all of a sudden, okay, I want to go to, say, Manhattan Beach, California.
Okay.
And I'm going to drive, right? Because it's a drivable distance from where I'm at. I'll put the exact address to want to go to. Never been there, right? Mm-hmm. So, presumably never been there.
Exact address could be your happiness or peace, whatever directive you give it.
Yeah, or you image something because you put a focus onto it. Like, I don't need direct route to happiness. Happiness is the foundation of the direct route. Happiness is the road, not the destination. The destination is just the fulfillment of the happiness, is the enacting or the experience of the happiness. So if you're waiting to get to Huntington Beach to be happy, it's going to be a hell of a
long
ride.
road.
Yeah, it's too far of a drive to be that miserable, right? You get pulled over and thrown in jail. That's what happened to me. So when I want to go there. Now I put in the GPS, the address, and then the GPS coordinates everything for me. And then once I get into my car and turn the car on, and then start to move just out of my driveway. Just as I'm moving out of my driveway, it will then say, head east on whatever street you live on. Go 500 feet, make a left. Now, can you imagine, I'm like, how is east? Now, being in Arizona, everyone knows that California is west from here. How is east going to get me west? Now, I pull back on my driveway and I try to figure this shit out and wonder why I never get to California.
That's a great example.
Yeah, so don't question it. Now, again, if I'm miserable, my GPS is still working, and it will lead me into misery. So we're here on Perspective Shift. Just check yourself. How are you feeling? Because the universe will lead you down a rabbit hole or leave you up to this highest brilliant light. The physics doesn't matter. Like, again, I could put a comedy on the structure of the universe, like called the screen, a movie, or I could put a horror movie on there. The screen does not care. The universe doesn't really care. We're the ones. So what is it do you want? So remember, God is love. I am love. And then what do I want to have? Okay. Now go into the imagination, generate it, get the feeling as if you already have it. Because God doesn't give you what you aren't already. You have to already be that. But when you're already that, you only get more of that. And that's where the expansion comes in. We have nothing to do with expansion. Expansion is a natural byproduct of this universe. Which way do we want to expand? Well, ask that. You would deserve it. So here you are. God is love. I am love. You are deserving of the expansion that you prefer. And then when you do that, you're going to act it out. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get my car and go because I know I can get there. And the GPS will lead me along the way. So, but it leads me along the way with bits of information at a time. Doesn't lay out though. It doesn't say, okay, on this journey you'll make 50 rights and 50 less. I'm like, yeah, but when do I do that? Like, don't worry about it. Just go and I'll let you know.
Well, and a good thing to also add to this is this scenario that Frank's describing here. This is going on all the time. And Eric Butterworth talks about this. He calls it faith. And he says, no matter what way your faith is going, you will achieve, you will experience. And what he's talking about is, for those at home, if we're saying, oh, that could never work, etc., what you're doing is the same technique Frank's talking about, just in the other direction. And when that's coming true, you're going, see, it doesn't work. I told you. And that in itself is showing you that this does work. So we're applying faith either way of the spectrum. You can be saying, these concepts don't work. Nothing's going to be good enough for me. I was born different. I didn't have this. I wasn't raised this way. And you're going to experience all that, and life's going to suck. And you're going to be like, see, I told you, my life sucks.
Yeah.
And it's because your faith is in the opposite direction. Your faith is that, nothing works out for me, that everybody's out to get me, and that I'm not worthy, and I'm not worthy of love, money, success, all these types of things. So it's not like faith is something that's only in one direction, a good way, and if that good way doesn't happen, this process doesn't work. No. It's showing you that no matter what way your attention goes, you will experience that. And faith works 100% of the time, because that's all this universe is based on.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill says that's faith in reverse.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
And the majority of people are living in faith in reverse.
Yeah, and I've lived that most of my life.
Me
and
too.
Periodically, and then when I got what I wanted, I'm like, okay, I got lucky.
That's where 98% of the world's at.
But... So
we're not going, oh, this is it working.
Yeah, when you're moving and believe in and have faith in the preferential, that's what we call bliss. Yeah. Happiness, you don't need that. Trust me, you don't. I could be happy. Happiness is the groundwork in which we come from. It's the
happiness is a state that we choose.
Yeah, happiness is who we are, if you will. It's like oh my God, how do I get to happiness? You are that. Now, what do you want to do with it? And I could pile a bunch of shit on it and not see the happiness and call that misery. But the basis of who we are is that. A lot of times people pile shit up so high, they're like, oh, I have to go deep into my life. I'm like, well, you didn't have to go deep. It's actually at the surface level. You just pile stuff so high up, it looks deep. These concepts are not deep, but they could seem deep because so many concepts are piled on top of it that the basis of it were shallow. I mean, like when I grew up, I remember... grew up in Long Island, in Merrick, and right on the Meadowbrook Parkway, there was a landfill, all right, and it's where they put the garbage. Yeah. Well, over time they stopped putting there, and then they put sod down, not sod, but seed down and soil, and they somehow mulched it into and broke it down to where it actually became a place where people hiked. Now Long Island is flat. So when you're driving, you're driving down the Meadowbrook Parkway, and like when I was a kid, it was a dump, but it was a garbage dump. But then I remember returning back, and you drive up there, and it's like they had this grass. It would look like a grass hill. But the basis, the level of, like, say I'm on the Meadowbrook Parkway, that is the basis of, like, so that hill was created by garbage.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was created by garbage. So people are like, oh, my God, if I want to get down to the bottom level, it's deep. I'm like, it isn't deep. You just piled shit on top of it. At the surface, you just have to shake it off. Life is simple, but if you keep piling concepts and ideas, this is how it is, on top of it, it seems and appears to be deep, but we're at that surface level and get there, right? There's nothing wrong with the hill, not saying that, but the basis of who we are is simplistic. Get to that rudimentary place. Get to the state of happiness. Your imagination gets there. Obviously focusing on something I want makes me feel good. Well, I have to be happy in order to get to the place to have the imagination. Or else I go into my imagination, it might be a horror show. Why aren't I happy? Well, because this happened. Like, oh, here we go again. You're blaming the outside world for not being happy. If you actually take the outside world out, take everything out. Like, I remember like being upset when I was a kid. And some adult or somebody just put the hand on me and say, it's going to be okay. This overwhelming feeling, because I believed them. All of a sudden, whatever it was, it dissolved, even though the situation was still at hand. That's who we are. We just forget. We are that. We are love. Again, I am love. That's the state of happiness. And then from there, that's when you want to have the prayer, the imagination, the thought, everything, and then you want to act on it. But if I'm miserable, I try not to do much.
You won't be excited.
Yeah, well,
or it won't be a preferential situation.
Yeah, you just make a bigger garbage heap. That's what you do.
Let's jump into this next clip.
There you go.
Some of us are completely unaware of the fact that we have the power to control the kind of thoughts that run rampant in our minds. That's the thing that's fundamental in this study of truth, to realize that it is your mind. Therefore, you have to ask yourself the question from time to time. When you find yourself terribly upset or concerned or anxious or worried about something that's happened, take a good look in yourself and ask yourself this one question. Not why do they do this? Why is the world falling apart? Why do we have so many problems in life? But why do I allow people or experiences or things to determine how I'm going to think or feel or act? This I can do something about. In the same way we tend to succumb to race beliefs, to group psychology, to subliminal suggestion, we're susceptible to the programming of mass media that is designed especially to control and influence thought, simply because we've allowed ourselves to react. This is why mass media is so successful. Because of this pattern of reactive thinking, we are led into a life that is not really our own at all. We don't live our lives. We live lives that are conditioned by outside stimuli. But that's because we refuse to accept the responsibility for our own thoughts. So the very first step in this process that we're calling the art of thinking is to know that no matter what happens in your world, no matter what happens out there, no matter what you read in the papers, no matter what is taking place around you or to you, you always have a choice.
That was really good.
Yeah. So the reason I chose that one is, again, this is like 30 years ago, right? 4 years ago, roughly, and he's talking about the influence of media, the influence of the world outside of us.
He has no idea the influence.
This is back when there was just one little box and we had maybe a couple news stations, whatever. Yeah. Now everything's our phone in our hand. It's coming at us from every direction.
There are people called influencers. I have they're an influencer. I'm like, yeah, but what are they influencing? It's funny, they're called an influencer. I'm like, yeah, but what are you influencing? What is it you're influencing people to do? I find it very interesting. And
you're influencing them how to think, feel, and act.
Yeah, and I believe also, too, this is how this can be, not always, but can be a great catalyst into people going within, because there's so much outside of us. There's so much without that we're almost going to be driven within. So the universe itself is pristine, where people like, oh my God, the world's we're going to implode, we're going to disappear, we're going to eliminate ourselves. Like, no. Like, the one thing we can't talk about is annihilation, because we're here. We can't talk about, we can talk about death to a point in our life and we shift into something else. We can talk about that. But we can't talk about non-existence, because we can only talk about what exists. And we exist. We always will and forever exist.
And have
in
always.
some form, in some form or some shape. So when you get to that basis of understanding, all of a sudden you start to look at stuff. I'm like, okay, when I see all this information coming in, and some people are getting like, my God, it's creating anxiety, and I'll look at them good, like, why? Because anxiety is the breaking point of letting go. Because it's shaking too much that you have to let go. But the fear of letting go is what keeps you in anxiety. Let go. But the anxiety gets so strong, it's going to force you to let go. And when you let go, it's like holding onto a rope, thinking you're miles from the ground, but you find out like 2 inches off the ground. But you couldn't look down because your neck wouldn't allow you. And then you let go. It's like, you start laughing. Damn. I remember, did I ever tell you this story?
What?
When I was a kid, I grew up on Long Island, so I was at Jones Beach one time, and I was in the water. And there was a little whirlpool. And what happened is the whirlpool was created, and I got sucked into it, and I got pulled out into the like the riptide. And I was swimming and swimming and swimming, and I'm like, I didn't think I was going to make it. And I looked to my right, and my buddy's standing there, and the water's up to his knees. And I'm like, think I'm going to drown. Because the water got pulled out so far. We were far from the shore. Mm-hmm. But usually, normally the shore would be taperly getting deeper, so that it would gradually get deeper. Taper, listen to me.
No, I
but
know
gradually get deeper. And I thought it was too far for it to be shallow enough for me to stand. And I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And the water was up to his knees. And I'm like, yeah, that was an illusion.
Honestly, though, that's how most of us are going through life. It's
true.
exactly that.
Yeah, and it was funny because I'm like, wow, I literally...
You thought you were going to die. You were like, oh, my God, this riptide's pulling me, et cetera, and you're swimming in it, and it feels so real.
Yeah, I was probably doggy paddling.
But that's honestly a great example.
Yeah.
One of the quotes he said in this is he says, realize it is your mind. He says, why do I allow the things outside of me, the different people, places, things, situations, to determine how I think, feel, and act? That is so powerful, guys. Like, that is what we're all going through on a daily basis, is exactly that. It's we're allowing the things outside of us, what the news says, to determine how I'm going to think, feel, or act. What did somebody say? Somebody's opinion about a movie. Somebody's opinion on what happened in the past. What our parents tell us is right or wrong. We're continually being influenced by this outside world and calling it our own and saying this is real. And it's not. We have the ability to go in. Well, it is real to a certain extent. It's real if you allow it. That's the key to all of this, is realizing I don't need to allow the outside world to affect how I'm thinking about a situation, how I feel, how I experience something. So stop giving your power away.
And the way how I came to understand this, I remember it was actually Bashar that I learned this from, that all truths are true. So stop trying to make your truth better than somebody else. This is why you fall into other people's trap. Because if someone's more articulate and has more conviction in their voice, and they've been around longer, and look at them, they have all the money in the world, and they have this, they must be right.
Oh, that's what politics is. That's what the whole show is.
But the truth is, they are right, but they're not your right. So all truths are true, and that's the empirical truth. So when I came to understand that, I wasn't trying to make their way false in order to make my way true. And that's why all of a sudden...
Great point.
Yeah, because if I do that and I can't argue against them, I follow them. No, I'm like, they're not wrong, but that isn't working for me. I want to go to Manhattan Beach, and I'm pulled to Manhattan Beach to go surfing. But people are like, but you're so right. Much better.
I love how you said it's not about trying to make the other person wrong.
If you do, you're getting caught in the trap yourself.
You're getting caught in the trap.
So it's about stepping out of the trap.
That's an awesome point.
And if we understand that,
it's not saying, these people are wrong.
No, they're not. They're not wrong. When I see people argue, it's entertaining when I hear conversation. Debate is different. Debate is coming to a whole different understanding if it's done properly and it's agreement. When people argue over a point, I'm like, but you're both right because you have evidence to it. But trying to make the other person wrong is where we go wrong.
And the best example of this, in my opinion, at least on a wide scale level, is think of like our democracy. Republicans and Democrats, both are wrong, but both are right.
Yeah.
It's like, and we stand on either side. And we're like, nope, these other people are wrong, and all this, and both are living their lives and experience things that are validating their opinion, validating what they believe, etc. So those two groups of people, if you will, are both experiencing exactly what they're talking about, going, see?
Yeah,
these damn what's-it-calls on the other side.
And when we become enlightened, now what does enlightenment mean? It just means stepping up above it and seeing all the viewpoints is equal, all right? Now, that might not work for you. Now, people are like, well, we live in a country where, I'm like, yeah, we do live in a country, but there's many ways to live in this country. It's amazing. Actually, there's many ways to live in the world. Now, you can use the limitations, all right? I only have certain liberties. Okay, that's nothing wrong with that. But within that field of limitations, there's infinite possibilities within that limitations. Like I mentioned that before. The idea of like a football field is limited, even though we created the limit, right? So it's not like set in stone. We created the limitation of 100 yards by 50 yards in order to have an unlimited amount of games. So we create this field of limits in order to express the unlimited because the focus. Because if I said a football field was infinite, like we played on some field in Iowa and, it was acres, what would how would you even play the game?
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't.
Or follow it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to follow it. It'd be very, very obscure.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, how do I know who's winning? Well, you don't. I think that person is.
Yeah,
they're farthest down
claims
the
to win.
5-acre field.
But once I create a limitation and set a set of laws, not principles, laws in it, and everyone's equal to the laws, all of a sudden we play the game, and then we make sure, okay, the referees are there to make sure no one steps out of the law. And if that's the case, all of a sudden my ability to imagine myself running past somebody or throwing a ball far or running fast or plowing through somebody, that's mine. And if I can't and I get tackled, I accept it. And that's how life is. So we do create these limitations, but they in themselves are illusions as well. They're not real. But yet, in order to have this experience, we create, the screen we put up there. I don't know how big. You say your TV screen's 55 inches, right? In order to watch a movie. But if it was infinite, where would I focus on? Would I have to sit in a chair that spun me around to watch a movie? And, even if you do that at night, look at the night sky, you want to focus on a star or a cluster of stars, or else you're going to get dizzy, And so it's about focus on something that we put out there, but it's an imagery, an illusion, but nonetheless, it's the focus aspect of it that satisfies the soul.
One thing I want to touch on, too, with this and Butterworth and just everybody. So each week, Frank and I, we go over, these different concepts and these different spiritual teachers, and people have influenced this new thought, realm, if you will. But one of the coolest things is how you can find the similarities in each of them. And what I kind of mean by that is, as I was researching Butterworth this last week, I saw that one of his he received a lot of accolades from people in the past, like Oprah Winfrey that we had mentioned, but he also received accolades from a gentleman named Vincent Norman Peale. And I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple weeks back we did a episode on Miss Helen Hadsell. And Miss Helen Hadsell had she first learned of these techniques through reading Vincent Norman Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. And so you can start to see how all of these concepts are connected and shared in different ways, and I think that is something that it's good to highlight in an episode like this, because it adds to your faith. It adds to your belief. I know when I started to learn about these concepts and I started to seek this out and I started, researching and listening to different speakers and people talk about this, everybody kind of explains it in their own little way. But it kind of creates this really great foundation where you consciously and subconsciously, believe these to be 100% truths. And as this, it's like a reprogramming of the old faith, the reverse faith of, oh man, nothing works out for me, etc., into this new, positive, if you will, or the preferential direction you would like to travel. And so it's very cool to see how, these different speakers can be still sharing similar concepts, but also the relationship they have and how, Butterworth's work can influence that of Vincent Norman Peale or influence that of Oprah Winfrey. And so that's something I wanted to make sure we touched on in this episode.
Yeah, and as you, the listeners out there listening that have been listening, to our podcast and others like it, notice the commonality. None of these people are telling you what to do. They're telling you the state to get into in order for you to do it. So it's not like, okay, if you get up in the morning and brush your teeth and do all that stuff, and that's all good and dandy, but they're not laying it out for you, because that is not the truth. That's an experience. And we've got to be careful that the outside world didn't create the happiness, didn't create the wealth. But my wealth embodiment is what created the physical world to look wealthy.
Created the circumstances.
Created the circumstances where the outside world can say, wow, that person's doing well. And then they're like, what did you do? And I'm like, I'm very careful. I'm like, it's not what I do. It's how I feel about what I do. Well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I can tell you my regiment, and guess it's going to change over time. But if you write everything down and do it, you might be torturing yourself. And then you're going to think, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, if my thing getting up in the morning is meditating for 20 minutes and then jumping in a cold shower and going to the gym, and you try doing that, that's going to torture the hell out of you unless you're already primed to do it. And if you were primed to do it, you don't need to ask me what the hell I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But the state I'm in, I'm like, I do these things for the experience. They're all permission slips, by the way. They really are. It's another thing I learned over time and different people talking about it. But the permission slip what allows us to have the experience. So I don't avoid the permission slip. I use it. But that is the experience. But it's not the cause of it. There's something deeper that we'll never be able to put our finger on. You know, me and Mike are going to try to darn this is to point in the direction of it. But no one could ever amount enough words or sentences or phrases to actually get there.
You can't name the Tao.
Just like the sign when I get close to the beach that's an arrow and it says beach is not the beach. It's just a sign pointing, and if I look at the sign, go there. But the sign itself is not the beach. These words are not enlightenment. You have to experience that. Enlightenment is just standing above it and seeing it for what it is. And then, stand above the traffic. Okay, then get back into traffic. Now you know how to get around the traffic. A GPS is a satellite in the sky. So we are that and the feet on the ground at the same time. We are this and that, not the or. But that's contained within us, not without. So I don't have to wait for someone to tell me what to do. I want to experience something, and my higher self tells me what to do. But my grunt body on the ground, it's like, ooh, this looks interesting. And then my higher self, well, if you find it interesting, I'll show you how to get there. If you believe you can get there, I'll show you how to get there.
Yep.
And that's how we become our own master and grunt. Experience. The grunt is the part that experiences, I should say, not from a negative thing, but we like that. I like the physical experience of things, of feeling it, going through the emotions.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, that's it. My 5 senses, I want to exercise them, but I want these 5 senses to really be sharp. And how do I do that? By enacting them.
As the father in the prodigal son says to the elder brother, "Son, thou art ever with me, and all that is mine is thine." All power is given unto you, Jesus says, right at the point where you are. There's always enough power by which to do the things that need to be done by you. We may not always know it, and that's the rub. The power of the infinite that is ever present and totally present at the point where you are is unconditioned and limitless. However, it is conditioned and limited by one's attitudes, one's faith, one's self-image. In other words, as Jesus said, you can do all things according to your faith. You can overcome, you can change, you can be healed, you can create according to your faith. Faith is a kind of perception, the way we see things. How far can you see? When you stand at the point of difficulty, a challenge, at the crossroads of human decision, how far can you see? As God said to Abraham, all the land which thou seest today will I give it. As far as you can see, how wide is your horizons? Sometimes we say, when we're having a hard time understanding something, I just can't see it. It's true, you can't perceive, your faith can't reach far enough to accept it. But the limitation is in your consciousness, not in the principle. The important thing is not how many have failed at a particular enterprise, but how many have succeeded. For what God has done, God is doing. In other words, it's an activity, an ongoing activity which is always present. God is doing the allness of things at this particular moment. We might say what man has done, man can do. What any person has done, you can potentially do, because God is doing it. Because the allness of God, the activity of God, is ever present. Now, people of supposed limitations physically, in times of great stress, have used what people have called supernatural power. It's an understandable term, but it's kind of unfortunate because it seems to indicate that there's some kind of power up in heaven that's different from power on earth. All power hath been given unto me in heaven and earth, Jesus said, because all power is the allness of power which is ever present. A person cannot lift his own weight when he's in a weakened condition, let alone lift many times his own weight. There's no point in arguing the point. That person can prove it to you. Let me read such an item as this in a newspaper, telling of a convalescent hardly able to lift his own breakfast tray, who was being driven home from the hospital by some friends. They met with an accident. While the friends were pinned under the car, the weakened man was thrown clear. Under the stress of necessity, and without thinking how impossible it would be, in his weakened condition, he braced himself and lifted the car just enough so that the friends could roll out. It was totally unthinkable, but yet apparently it happened. This all power does not apply to physical strength only. We may see it in the world of growing things. For instance, mushrooms have been known to lift a paving several inches from the ground, despite the fact that you could prove it to anyone that the fragile mushroom couldn't possibly stand under a heavy stone. It would normally be crushed. Yet there it is. Many of you have seen the phenomenon of an oak tree growing through solid granite rock. Rock so heavy that it would take hours and hours with heavy equipment for us to break the rock in sunder. But the growth of the seed, the unfoldment of the tree, rent the boulder in sunder. Also, the all-power applies to the inherent ability that is within us to do creative things of all kinds, influenced by the unconditioned power of God. There's so many stories that we could tell about this. Many of us can relate stories of our own experience. There's one illustration that I've used before, but it bears repeating. It's an item that appeared in the New Yorker some years ago about Zimbalist, the great violinist. Since I spent many years in my early life in music, it makes a great impression on me. And we quote, "Somehow nobody told Zimbalist that he was supposed to play the piano too. During the final examination of the music school in his 18th year, they handed him a Beethoven sonata to be read at sight before the presence of the whole faculty. He had never touched the piano other than to get his A and tuning his violin. It was ridiculous. There was no way. However, he sat down, got his breath, and played. Not masterfully, but acceptably. When he finished, he was told to close the book and repeat the whole sonata from memory, which he did. After a moment of stunned silence, the room broke into applause, an unheard-of demonstration. Now, human reasoning would say that this couldn't possibly be done. No one could play the piano without lessons and years of practice, and then even more play a difficult sonata. Impossible. Yet again, apparently it was done. Think about it a moment. You'll begin to see the full implications of Jesus' statement that the kingdom of God is within you.
See, those examples are great. And everyone can see these examples in their life. And, how the man who had no power to lift the car, or was obviously not strong enough to do so, but did it because he took the belief out that he could not.
Honestly, that was a great clip. So powerful, those stories. But I mean, you've heard women doing that when their children were trapped under cars.
Yeah, because they eliminate themselves from thought that they could not. And I've seen women afterwards, they don't remember the act of doing it.
No.
They went into like an altered state, and some people are like, oh, it was adrenaline. I'm like, you could call it whatever it was. It was more of a, if you will, electromagnetic field that helped them lift it. But it was something they did. I guess we try to explain it, but it's very unexplainable because of a limited understanding of what the human body can do. But it's like, wow, as time goes on, we're seeing the breakdown of that, and just the outside world, like, the idea of a mushroom pushing up a piece of concrete.
Well, even going back to, again, the different teachers and people we've covered on this show. Dr. Joe Dispenza, when he was hit by that vehicle on his bike and shattered all those bones in his spine and, back vertebrae, etc. They told him he wasn't going to walk. You know, there's so many stories out there that we can all go look up and find of people that were told they'll never walk again.
And
that went into their mind and started rebuilding their back, rebuilding, their spine. There's this gentleman I just recently started following on social media who did this. And he was in a car accident, and they told him he was never going to walk again. Yeah. And within 2 years, he was fully walking, back running normal, etc. All through mind.
Yeah. What I suggest, anyone listening, don't necessarily just gain stories from other people. What in you were you told that you overcame? Lay a foundation on that because you overcame it. So what else do you want to overcome? Well, the fact that you overcame it, and everyone overcame something. You just don't try to make it as profound as lifting a car. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be, you didn't think you were going to pass a test, but you did. Land the job that you did, but you were able to land the job and get the money you want. Whatever it is that you overcame to do that, because that's what life is about, growing, and growing is the understanding of overcoming where you were. Not to make it bad, but it was overcoming it. Go into your life and examine, and when you do, you actually have the evidence. Because a lot of times you go outside yourself and say, well, yeah, Dr. Joe Dispenza is Dr. Joe Dispenza. That's why his spine healed. And, I don't want to put my kid under a car to learn if I cannot do that. No, whether you went in and never were able to do something, but automatically you did it, is no different to the universe than healing your spine. It's the imagination that brings you beyond, or faith that brings you beyond the point in which everything seems to be real. It's not.
I love that you said that. That's a great point and a great segue into this last video clip.
All right, here we go.
There's a great deal of interest today in the subject of success through right thinking. More recently, this has been revised somewhat in terms of an interest in success through mind control. But there's one thing that is rarely given the attention that it should have, and that is success through emotional control. And this we would like to think about today. We all have people we look up to. We have our own personal heroes and heroines. Have you ever asked yourself why you look up to a certain person? Whoever it is, someone in the theater, someone in politics, someone in business, perhaps some teacher. If you carefully analyze your thoughts, you will be surprised, I think, to discover that it is not always because of what the person can do, or what the person can say, or what the person has created, but more than likely the reason is very subtle. It is because you have responded positively to his poise or his emotional control. People who do not control their emotions rarely achieve any stature head and shoulder above the crowd in life. And the person who has a certain amount of emotional control is a person who will rise regardless of other deficiencies. This is a person who, when faced with matters requiring quick action or decisiveness, remains calm and unhurried and unruffled. It's a person who doesn't waste his energy in anger and in resentment. It's a person who doesn't indulge in futile quarrels with people who perhaps in one way or another do not agree with them. And because they keep from what we may call emotional tantrums, their mind is invariably free to think creatively and clearly. It is probably true that some of the most brilliant people, some of the most talented people in any other ways, never achieve the kind of success that many people look up to, simply because they lack this emotional control. Quite often, it is asked of a person, I wonder why he's never really made it in life. He seems so talented. He seems, so effective. What is it? What's the reason for the seeming inability to achieve success? And almost invariably, it is because there is a lack of emotional control. Many of us do not achieve the success or the fulfillment that otherwise we may be perfectly capable of, and certainly that we desire to know in life, because of what we might call emotional leaks in the boiler. We blow off steam in too many small ways to make for any great accomplishments in life. It's sad, but this is the way life normally is. It need not be this way, however. It is also true that this secret of success is a key to maintaining health and wellness of mind and body. A heart specialist here in New York City a few years ago made the statement that we're recognizing the fact that most people are sick not because of organic or pathological reasons, but he said a large amount of heart trouble is due to the inability of people to manage their emotions. There's a great deal of interest in the field of mental health and in the problem of mental disease. Dr. Carl Menninger, a few years ago, defined mental disease in a way that may cause all of us to cringe just a little bit. He says mental disease is the inability to maintain emotional control in the face of inner stress, to be overcome by fears, to be driven by frustration, and to be consumed by resentment.
That was really good.
I love that. So that last little clip,
yeah.
Let's start with that. So mental illness, this Dr. Carl Menninger, defines it as an inability to maintain emotional control during times of stress, and to, how did he finish it? And to essentially have this lack of control reaction. We react rather than respond. So essentially what this doctor is saying is that 99.9% of this Western world, at least the world I grew up in, we have a form of mental illness. We react to these stressors. We do not have an emotional control. And when things come up, they're used to, I don't want to say they're used against us, but it's, we work against ourselves, rather than for ourselves. And media, the news, our politicians, people are very aware of this. This is why a lot of our news article leads with fear. If people are afraid, people are going to respond accordingly. But I had to share that because that was so powerful about emotional control.
Yeah. And I believe everyone out there, I'm going to take it on to myself. I've been in that place where I had lack of emotional control in certain circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the circumstance, like what are they? I'm like, those are the points in my life where I was about to expand beyond the point in a higher elevated place, and I collapsed and I got emotionally angry, and I was like, well, this is how it is. And it's almost like you're the one who puts the villain in your story. It wasn't inherent, or it wasn't, there's nothing injected into your life other than the story in your head, and we defeat ourselves in our own story. Mm-hmm. So remember that there's nothing injecting into your world other than you, or allowing somebody else's thought to come in there. But when they put it in there, you actually take it in. So there is nothing else outside of us.
That's a great,
than what we have within. So what do you want to take within? And guess what? A thought isn't conscious. It's not conscious. My awareness to the thought is the consciousness. Now, if I believe the thought to be true and I feel bad, I start to feel it, and my consciousness recognizes I don't feel good. So my conscious says, well, why do you want that to feel that way? And then my logical mind might say, well, this is how it is. And the conscious is like, well, that's not how it is unless you proclaim it to how it is. But it's a prop. You can make whatever. I could take a broom and make it a flying object, such as a witch would do. I could sweep the floor with it, or I could turn it around and make a stickball bat out of it. I'm the one utilizing the prop for how I need it to use in the moment in which I need it. So that's the power we have. When we change the narrative, we actually see the physical world change around us. But our power is the ability to change the narrative and then watch what happens. Then the gift appears.
One of the sayings I always think about, too, when I hear something like this and about emotional control and everything is the definition of insanity. And, insanity, we all know, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So by definition, our civilization is insane.
Oh, I've been insane for years.
And by definition, everyone on this podcast is going, well, shit. By definition, I'm insane. Yeah. We wake up the same way. We do the same habits. We fall into the same types of, problems, situations every day. So by definition, we are living in insanity. We are each and every one of us insane. And so it's up to us to take over this emotional control that Butterworth is talking about here, to not be insane and to get this emotional control figured out, get a good handle on it, because this is how we start to live a life of balance. This is how we begin to experience success. So people always say, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, as if that's not the law of faith completely and totally at work.
Yeah, it's physics.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Why? What are they focusing on? The rich are focusing on continued wealth, prosperity, growth.
If somebody says that with some bit of aggravation, it means they're placing themselves in the poverty place.
Correct. And they're saying, hey, it doesn't matter what I do, I'll never be rich because I didn't start out rich. Yeah. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, there is truth in that, because whatever I doing has nothing to do with it. Yeah. So in other words, if you have a regimen that you like to do every day, and some days you feel good, some days you don't blame it on the regimen. Blame it on how you look at the regimen. So we're not here to tell you to quit your job and do anything. No. Change anything. Like if you go into a certain church, go to it. But start to look at it differently. Start to look at your coworkers differently. And all of a sudden your life will change. You'll still have the same job, but you'll feel elevated. And all of a sudden things are going to happen and things are moving. You're actually enjoying going to work rather than avoiding going to work. It has nothing to do with what we're doing. It's how we feel about what we're doing. And we create the narrative. Again, my job is a prop. How I look at it is how it's going to make me feel. And why would I choose something against wanting to feel bad? Now, sometimes I forget and I feel bad, but that feeling bad is an alarm system for me. Like, whoa, what am I doing? I don't like the way this feels.
That's why it's there.
Yeah, if you put a piece of food in your mouth that tasted horrible, what do? You spit it out. You don't continue chewing it. But when you have a thought in your head, spit it out. Exactly. Why would you hold on to it?
When you feel that sensation.
Because we think this thought is consciousness, but the thought is not. A thought is an object. It isn't have a consciousness to it. We generate a feeling around that thought based on the definition we give to the thought. But the thought has no power.
Start spitting out all those old thoughts. That's what I started doing. No, but that's true. Yeah. Like that is a perfect example. Yeah. This instrument that we've been associating with and identifying with and calling our body, it's an instrument. It's a tool. And it's exactly like what Frank just described. This doesn't feel good. I need to let go of it. We're never taught that. We're taught, let's dive deeper into how painful this is and describe why it's painful.
And try to get rid of that person.
No, that's stacking more shit like Frank was talking about. Yeah. You could easily go, this doesn't feel good. I let go of it.
Yeah, let go of it. And then from that, you get into a neutral state. Then you can pick something else up that's more preferential that make you feel better. And it's not that the thought makes you feel better, but acting on it and going at it actually perpetuates the feeling good already. So again, in physics, everything expands. All right? If I feel wealthy, I feel good. I just get more expansion of good. If I feel like shit and I'm poor, I expand in that direction. Correct. So the neutrality allows me to choose the preferential place. Because if I'm neutral, it's easy to choose that. But then I'm like, but I head down this path and then something happens. Like, we just merely get distracted. No big deal. Or there's a detour. I'm like, well, maybe the detour is teaching us something. If I was driving a car and there was a detour, I wouldn't go home. I would just go take the detour. Mm-hmm. follow the yellow sign, and you get there and you realize, oh, the bridge was down. That's why it took me this way.
Yeah.
But if I avoided the detour, I would have drove out of my way and I'm like, damn, the bridge is down. Then you're like, hell, I'm going home.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that in my life. I've headed down this path. I want to go down it. In the first detour, I stopped, scratched my head, turned the car, went right home. Yeah. But the beautiful thing is the universe never gives up on you.
Never.
Your dreams that you had as a child are still awake and live in you because it's who we are. We came here. So go within, use your internal guidance system to see how you feel, and then see what happens. And then recognize the change, the shift in your world. Don't worry about anyone else. Mm-hmm. You recognize it and like, pat yourself on the back, go forth and tell no one. Yeah. Don't be patting yourself on the back. You look a little weird.
But you'll start to see this level of emotional control.
Yeah, you will.
Where you're like, before I would have reacted so much to this. There's something different there. And it feels so good.
Yeah, because you were talking about this earlier, but you mentioned like the character James Bond.
Yeah. Well, no, this is something you bring up regularly.
Yeah, so why is it like when you watch James Bond, why are we so attracted to a character like James Bond or a Lara Croft, if you will? Mm-hmm. Put the female perspective in there as well, because it's all the same. It doesn't matter. Is because regardless of the circumstances, situation they're in, that we're watching them in, they maintain this steady understanding of their emotions. So if James Bond is at a bar drinking martinis, has a woman to the left and a woman to the right, he's cool and collective. And if he's thrown into the back of a trunk and tied up, he's cool and collective. Because he knows in the act of cool and collective, he can figure out how to get out of that trunk. And we know he's getting out of the trunk.
Hell yeah.
But we watch it because how is he going to get out of the trunk? And you're like, well, his calm, cool collectiveness created the situation, circumstance to arise for him to act on. But if he was panicking, it would have been all over.
You would have missed.
We would have left the movie theater. Can you imagine James Bond like,
oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah. And if a beautiful girl came up to him, he'd be like all nervous and shit. Like, who would watch that? What do I do?
But no, that's exactly why. And so be your own James Bond. Be your own Lara Croft.
Well, yeah.
You are. You always have been.
Another point I want to make there is the only reason we're attracted to that is because we are that. You could not be attracted to something you aren't already. So we only recognize that calmness because we have that in us. We also have the squirrely little Tasmanian devil in us too. So which one do you choose today? You choose the calmness, you choose the Bond, or the Tasmanian?
But you're absolutely right. Yeah. Like this is why we love the story of the underdog, the hero's journey. Each and every single one of us are on our hero's journey right now, guys. That's the point of this earth. Yeah. That's why we're here. We're here to remember who we are, what we are, this power, this creation. That's why we're here.
And if anyone ever wants to ask the question to themselves, what's my purpose here? And this is just a narrative. Your purpose is to tell your story as best as you want. How you tell the story, what the story ends up like, that's up to you. But it's here to tell the story. And like, do you want to tell the story like this or like this? And if even telling the story like this isn't bad, if that's your tone, fine, it's okay. Not everyone has to be, And
remember, this story that you've been telling, just because you've been telling it one way for 25, 30, 40, 50, even 60 plus years, it doesn't mean you can't change like that. No. In this moment, you can change the story starting today. So don't let this idea of old trauma and, well, I've been living like this. I'm now 65. There's no way I can change my story. It's too late in the game. That is so false. So false.
Yeah, you can
you're
change
a new person.
Quick. Yeah. It was almost like
every moment you breathe, every time your heart beats, you're a new person. And so it's at this moment is when it clicks, and it's at this moment is when things change. Like, don't put these like weird, I've had too much trauma in my life to allow this. Yeah. Okay, well, were you beaten and molested and raped by your cousin like Oprah was every day growing up? No. Okay, well, she built an empire. Again, that's just an example. But at the end of the day,
that's an extreme example of what we understand from the physical. But make it like, you ever see that movie Dusk to Dawn?
No, that doesn't.
It was a Quentin Tarantino, and I guess
maybe I've seen it.
Rodriguez.
I've seen
he combined it with this other director. I think it was Rodriguez. I think his name was. It was a normal very interesting movie until the very end, and then it got very sci-fi-ish. I thought so. Here it is, a story like Mike was saying. The story's going on, the same story, and it was about these robbers who escape prison and they hijack a family, and they're in the Winnebago and they're driving around, and they finally come to this place called Dust of Dawn. It was a bar, and when they go in there, everyone was serpents.
Oh, what?
Yeah, it was crazy. I'm watching this movie, then all of a sudden it turns into a sci-fi just like that. I'm like, wait, that took a weird turn.
Well, that's literally what we can do.
That's what we can do.
Absolutely.
So
Good
be
example.
like a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah. If you guys like what you're hearing about Eric Butterworth, get online. He's got some good YouTube content. He's got some stuff online that you can check out. He has written 16 different books, a lot of which have been bestsellers. There's so many great books out there on his stuff. He lived until 2003, so a lot of his stuff is very much so still relevant. His concepts are still discussed at the Unity Church.
Yeah, the concepts will be relevant to the end of time.
End of time. I mean,
which time won't end?
Yeah, I was gonna say these concepts are forever and always true. You know, it's concepts of the universe.
Yeah, they're just principles. They're not doctrines. They're principles.
Correct.
There's a difference.
Yep.
So and we also like to thank Susan Francis for introducing us to Eric Butterworth. Yeah,
absolutely.
Great.
If you guys have anybody that you want to see featured like Susan, feel free to write in. Tell us why. Tell us how this person impacted your life. A little bit of the story. That way we can share that on air too.
Yeah. All right. If you like what you've seen here, just go down and hit the subscribe button. Yep. Also, you can DM us on Instagram, I believe, right?
Yep. Yeah. Or reach us by email.
Send
us an email, perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com.
Yeah, we'll get back to you. All right. Thank you again.
See you guys next week.
Peace out.